Hello, writers. It's Megan in All Writers Welcome. Um, I posed this question: when and how should you edit your writing? And I have a lot of thoughts on that. That's why I wanted to do this topic. If you have thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear them too. So I got started thinking about this topic for a number of reasons. One of them was that when Ella and I, excuse me, did a video about how much time does it take to write, and there was this conversation about quality versus quantity. Caitlin asked a question about different places, different places you write, whether you're writing longhand or you're writing on the computer, and specifically how this might affect your quality or your quantity. And I think this is probably something a lot of writers have. The different places they write affects them greatly. And I know I've coached writers who tell me it's really hard for them to be creative on the keyboard. So I want to start with that. I want to start with the idea of drafting, and this will take us into a conversation about editing. To my mind, the best place to draft is the place that you will draft best. So if for you that's writing longhand in a journal or a notebook, absolutely you should do it. If it's on the computer, absolutely you should do it. I don't know about you. I find that where I am on my computer really makes a vast difference. For some reason, the difference between a Google Doc and a Word doc is really powerful for me. I write more in a Google Doc. I think it's got something to do with this idea that it feels less permanent. It's being saved to the cloud, and somehow my brain tells me that it's not as big a deal. It's less of a barrier to start. Hey, Nicole. Oh, thanks. I'm glad you find the videos helpful. So that's the first thing, is definitely find the space that works for you. But then Caitlin went on to ask, I'm not sure at what point I should edit. And when I go to then type my draft onto my computer, I want to be able to do some light editing. So here's where I want to really dive deep into this. I strongly believe, I've experienced with all the writers that I've coached, that there are different parts of our writing brains. And I think when we try to use them at the same time, we end up making more work for ourselves. And this, if you can think of doing any kind of craft project, let's take something really simple. You know that it takes longer to do the whole craft from beginning to end than to do it assembly line style, right? Like just the time to kind of pick up the scissors and do that, and then pick up the markers, right? Each new tool that you pick up takes you time. Well, this is doubly so when you're writing, because it's not a matter of setting down a pair of scissors and picking up a pen. You have to make a shift in your brain. The shift between planning your story and drafting is immense, and the shift between drafting and going back, and I'm going to use the term editing very loosely here, but reviewing what you've written and making changes to it, I'll say it that way, is also very significant. So I think the best gift you can give yourself is not to switch among the various parts of your writing brain several times within your writing time. I say when you sit down to write, use that time effectively by just doing one task. I have personally done some drafts of stories, full-length children's books by hand. In fact, one of the children's books I wrote, like picture books, I had been thinking about the idea for a while, and I was turning it around in my mind, kind of almost like a 3D model, and thinking about how I wanted it to play out. I already knew the plot because it was very simple and straightforward. And I got inspired one day, and I took a notebook and I sat outside and I wrote an entire rough draft. And again, this is a children's story. This is maybe 20 pages of, thinking about words and illustrations. Yes, Eleanor, if you want to message me, I'd be happy for you to message me. So I just got it all out in one go. And then this is what I did with it. I brought it inside. I have terrible handwriting. You guys, I cannot read my own handwriting. It is awful. It is chicken scratch. So while it was still decipherable, I brought it inside and I typed it. And here's how I typed it. I pretended this was not my writing. I pretended my job was to transcribe writing that had been given to me. That meant if I were doing my job correctly, I was not interjecting. I was not saying, oh, there would be a better way or a more elegant way of saying that. My job was to simply type away as fast as I possibly could before I lost the ability to read my own terrible chicken scratch handwriting. That part of the writing brain, I call the ant. For me, that's a really powerful image. I think of ants as really hardworking, and they're, in it for the whole colony. They're, an ant is not, unless he's in a Disney Pixar movie, an ant is not like, I know, I'll go out on my own and I'll do something different and I'll be a renegade. Ants are really regular. They're very efficient. They're very effective. They can lift something like 100 times their own weight, right? I love the image of an ant just plodding along. It's like, I just gotta go keep doing my job. So I would highly recommend, Caitlin, when you're going from that draft that you found was much easier to do longhand to the draft on your computer, do not go into your editing or your revising brain. Stick in your ant brain who's just going, I'm just going to get all these words down. All right, then you have it down, then you can come back and revise it later. But that is the biggest piece of advice I can give you that, again, I have seen work with all of my coaching clients. Just let that draft get all the way finished. Okay, and there's so many reasons for that, but let me start with something that happens to a lot of writers. A lot of writers end up fully made up with their hair done, with maybe some jewelry, naked. Or they've got a shirt on and then the rest is nothing. And what I mean by that is they take, they start at the top and they go, well, before I move on to my next chapter, I'm going to make sure this first chapter is really stellar, right? And they work it and work it and work it and work it and work it. And then it sucks all the energy and the time and the momentum from the rest of the story. And it also makes it harder to write by comparison, because if part of your story is polished and then you are trying to work on a rough draft, it's really hard not to get comparisonitis and go, but this thing I'm writing right now is not as good as that first thing. I'm going to delete, because you may forget that the first part of your story didn't begin looking that polished, right? It got that polished because you went back and you reworked it. So that's what I mean by you might end up like with your hair really nicely done and, a t-shirt, and then you're naked. You're like, oh, yay, I'm dressed, but you're not, right? The point is to have your whole book, your whole story, whatever it is you're working on, all of it polished, but it can't be polished until it's all complete. So to avoid running out of steam, I highly recommend don't go back and start reworking until you have finished the whole thing. When I coach writers, I don't allow them to go back. I'm really mean about it. No, you may not go back and start making changes. It can be a little bit different with a fiction book. I'm actually with a nonfiction book. Let's close that. Oh. Okay. Right. Google Voice wants me to be on the phone, but I don't want to be on the phone. I don't want to be talking with you guys. Okay. So I'm really strict with people when they're writing stories. I understand when you're writing nonfiction, or if you're working for a publisher, that's the situation I'm finding myself in right now, where I'm writing something for a publisher. And so the editor I'm working with has that prerogative to say, okay, I want to see, your first 3 chapters by this date. So I understand there are exceptions, but by and large, when you're working on a story, the worst thing you can do is go back and start editing. There are so many reasons for this. You may change your mind. You may go in a different direction, and it turns out that scene you spent all that time polishing back in chapter 1 is something you're not even going to use. So this is, I keep making this analogy of if you're remodeling a house, you don't start by painting the walls before figuring out which walls you're going to knock down. You don't do the detailed work before you've gotten the big structure pieces in place. So going back and reworking and getting all of the polish on something before you know what the whole looks like is really dangerous. You're very likely to waste time and energy on that. But I'm going to return now to this idea I brought up of the different parts of your writing brain. When it's time to revise, when you have completed your draft to the best of your ability, I'm not saying you won't go back and add in more scenes. You absolutely might do that. But when you have completed your draft, honestly, to the best of your ability, and you say, these are all of the scenes and all of the pieces of the plot and the character that right now I know need to be in place, then I want you to completely switch gears and go into your revising brain. But I don't want you to go into any part to start with. I want you to work from the biggest pieces down to the smaller pieces. Again, don't sand and paint that wall until you're sure it's not getting knocked down. So if you wait to edit, and again, I'm using this term really broadly. If you think of editing as just any time you go back to look at your work to improve it, whether you're looking at something as big as the story structure or something as small as whether that comma goes there. When you go back to edit, it should be all at once so that you can work from biggest to smallest. You want to be able to look at your whole story and start from the outside with big things like the structure, and then, zoom into things like the character, and eventually get to the language, and then eventually get to editing for style and for grammar. And each of those modes is, again, a different kind of thinking. And it will cost you so much more time and energy if you are, even though you're, in your mind, I'm just editing and that's different from drafting. Like, okay, Megan, I listened to you. I did my drafting first. Now I'm editing. But it's still a different kind of thinking to go to work on the pieces of the structure and the story, or to work on the language. Those are different parts of your brain. So the more you switch back and forth among them, the more energy you're expending. I don't want you to be a lazy writer. That's not what this is about. I'm not suggesting that you should kind of pull back or not do your best work. But I just believe so strongly that more work is not necessarily equal to better outcome. Smarter work is, doing work on the right things at the right times. And I have a really concrete example of this that I'd love to share. I went on this fantastic trip to New York in May to see family. And while I was there, we got every kind of weather. The first day I was in, it was really cold and rainy. And then over the course of a few days, it was typical hot, muggy East Coast weather. And I was walking around one day, when you're a tourist, you spend a lot of time walking. But I had wanted to get some work done. And so I was carrying my computer with me, and it was really hot, and I was walking around, and I realized I was walking in circles because I was scouting out where would be a good place I could stop and eat lunch and find some Wi-Fi, but I didn't have a plan. And I'm sitting there, or not sitting, I'm walking and I'm sweating, and my mind is like, oh, well, I must be getting closer to some kind of plan because this sure is difficult, right? Like, this sure is unpleasant. I'm sweating through my clothes, and I've got sweat streaming down my face, and my computer is heavy, and I'm really over this. And I thought, well, I must be getting closer to some goal because it's so hard. But I wasn't. I was just expending energy without a plan and without getting any closer to making a plan and to doing something that worked, until I stopped and kind of figured out, like, looked at a map and brought up Yelp and thought, okay, where am I going? So yes, that's a little bit, commonplace, but think about this attitude we tend to have that if we're just in pain, it must mean we're getting closer to our goal. And it's not necessarily true. And it's definitely not true when you're writing. So, to go back to this bigger picture and this question that Caitlin asked, please don't start going back and editing or revising your writing until you have a draft that, from the point of view of where you are, feels complete. You've done everything that you planned to do. Definitely, please don't edit as you type up from a draft. And then, make sure even when you're revising that you do one task at a time, so that you stick with one part of your writing brain at a time, and really get the most going. And don't be afraid to draft on paper. If that's where you find your best ideas are coming from, then that's absolutely a great place to do it. So I want to say one more thing about the parts of your writing brain. I refer to the drafting part of your brain as the ant. And there's an idea implied there, but I want to really make it explicit. The ant is not creative. The ant is not the part of your writing brain who has brilliant ideas. I call that part the mad scientist, because I just love that image of, you know, like a scientist with the crazy hair, and there's test tubes, and there's, I don't know, there's slime, and there's explosions. There's all kinds of stuff happening, because it's, you know, when any idea is a good idea, and you're throwing out ideas left and right, and you're brainstorming, and you're getting excited about creating. So in order to take advantage of the ant, in order to use that part of your writing brain, you have to have put your ideas in place first. And I am not suggesting that everybody has to have Post-its or note cards and get their whole story storyboarded. If you recall, when I told the story about writing that children's book, I had just been turning that idea around in my brain. And it was a short enough story that I could see the whole thing. Right. It was like looking at the map from above, and I could see the whole thing, and I knew exactly points A, B, C, D, etc. So this is not about you having to plan in a particular way or to do a detailed outline. It's whatever planning speaks to you and prepares you to write. But that does need to happen before you get to the stage of letting your ant just go, 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 go. Because otherwise your ant won't know what the task is. I guess it would be like an ant colony where there are no pheromones going around. Isn't that how they communicate, right? By smell or the chemicals, and they know, oh, I'm supposed to be gathering leaves right now. I'm supposed to go out and get some twigs and some food for the queen. The drafting part of your brain can be an incredibly hard worker, but only if you give it the content ahead of time. So Caitlin, if and when you get a chance to watch this, I hope you let me know if that answered your question. Eleanor, did you have a question? Nicole, was there a question you wanted to pose? Anybody else who's watching now or later, please feel free to leave a question in the comments. So yeah, Caitlin, specifically your question was, you just started your second chapter, freehand writing, and you're debating when you should pause and light edit what you have and convert to typing as you go. Please don't pause and light edit. Please just type it, let your ant type it up, and you'll come back later and you'll do your revising. The one exception I make is that I will go back through after I've let my ant type up. I won't even read, I'll just look for red underlines, and I will immediately correct those. And that's really just a piece that's the analog of typing it up as soon as I write it up. That's just, I don't want to lose the memory of what I meant there. If I have typos or wacky spelling, I just don't want to lose the intention there, because otherwise there's no point in writing it down. If these strategies of revising are sounding good to you, I'll give you 3 guesses where I'm going to be taking you through them. Yes, you got it. It is in the Write Market and Publish Your Book program that Ella and I are doing. And the reason we're confident that we're going to help you guys move through this material, move through the hard task of writing a book in 4 months, is because we've really thought through where are the places you can save time, because you are not transferring among different parts of your writing brain. You're going to stay all in one part and, use all your energy effectively there. Then you're going to move to another part. And we're going to guide you through revising, moving from bigger ideas to smaller ideas, so that you don't get caught in that circle of just going around and around in one scene, trying to, make something better. And you're not even sure how. And the way we do that, and this is what I do with every writing coaching client I work with, is by using annotation. It's so different to rework a scene when you have a goal. If you've gone first through and you've made annotations, which is nothing more than putting comments in your own writing. But if you've gone through and you're like, this is boring me. Okay, now I've got something to start with. I know that's not yet a goal, but this is a response, this is boring me. And then presumably the goal is, I want this to be more exciting. But you'll define what you want to have be different there. And that will prevent you from just going around in circles and going, oh, it's not this and it's not that. Because it's really hard to find something when you don't know what you're looking for. But if you know that you want that scene to be more exciting, or you want the character to sound more concerned, or you want that dialogue to be funnier, then you can do something with that. You can achieve that goal and know when you've arrived, basically, right? You're giving yourself an endpoint that you can define whether you've gotten to or not. And there's this idea of, setting SMART goals, and it's an acronym that means that they should be, oh goodness, now I'm going to forget what they are. But they have to be definable, like you can tell when you've reached them. They have to be realistic. They have to have a time element, all of these pieces. But the core is that you can't reach a goal that you haven't defined. If you don't know what it would look like to have achieved that, you'll just keep striving after it. So again, this is, the kind of stuff we're going to be taking you through in the Write, Market, and Publish Your Book program. I'm really excited to be able to take a group of writers through it. These are like all of my favorite coaching tools that I usually get to do one-on-one with writers. And in the past, when I've done them in groups, it's like this energy and acceleration. There's the joy that the writers get individually from like, oh, I'm not wasting my time on that. But then there's also this really wonderful collaborative energy that comes from people working together on something that's really important to them. So I'm really, really excited. All right. If you want to find out more about that, we are doing a free webinar this evening. We are also doing one tomorrow, Friday morning. And for those of you in different time zones, it's the next one is coming up in about 2 hours, in roughly 2 hours. And I will put the link in the comments below. So if you want to know more, you can join us there. And if you have more questions about editing, if you'd like to talk about your editing process, get the conversation going in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. All right, guys, happy writing. I will chat with you soon. Bye.